Welcome. I'm Professor Kravitz, and this video is going to look at an essay by a philosopher named Bertrand Russell, and the essay is called In Praise of Idleness, which is a strange title, right? Who's going to praise idleness, right? That's being lazy, doing nothing. That's weird. Okay, who is Bertrand Russell anyways? Well, he lived from 1872 to 1970. He's a British philosopher. He's very important. He is one of the looming figures over the 20th century, 21st century, and right from the beginning of the 20th century. He's working in logic, mathematics, science, and he's doing very important work. In the latter half of his career, his life, he gets involved in other parts of philosophy, like the history of philosophy, and also social and political issues. He came from a very, very wealthy family of nobility. In fact, one of his relatives, like a great-great-grandfather, saved England, right? There was a long period of just bloody civil war. What was going on was we had two forms of government, and it was a fight to the death, right? One or the other, between sort of a monarchy, a royal family, and then more of a republic, a parliamentarian where you have representatives come in and vote. And so you had both sides fighting against each other, and this Bertrand Russell. Someone's messing with my stuff. So, sorry about that. Some gremlins coming in here. So, the relative says, hey, maybe we could do both. Some sort of hybrid system, and that's what you still have today. This is what held together, right, England. So, very important family, and Bertrand Russell could have spent his life just doing nothing, right? Didn't have to worry about money. He could have had a life of luxury, but he didn't do that. He got very involved in academia and the important issues of the day, and he worked really hard his whole life. So he could have had a very easy life, and he chose not to do that. Another really important part of his story, I find this really interesting because, well, I'm not a big fan of smoking, and I don't smoke, and it doesn't, in some ways, like, you should be able to do whatever you want too, but smokers, when they smoke, I have to breathe it in, and it really affects me. So it's sort of a pet peeve of mine that I wish there was a different way of getting in nicotine where everybody else didn't have to smell it. So, anyways, smoking, usually we see that as something that's going to shorten your life. It's going to harm your health. But in Bertrand Russell's case, it saved his life. And this is a really interesting story, a story that he himself tells. It's called the Buchenbrousse disaster. It occurred in October 2nd of 1948. So this is just a couple of years after the end of World War II in 1945. And Russell was on a flight, a Norwegian flight from Oslo to Hamovik, and it was a seaplane. It was going to land in a bay. He had to go somewhere to give a talk, and he's a smoker. So he sat in the smoking section of the plane, which was the back of the plane. And the non-smokers were all in the front. As the plane was landing, there was a lot of wind. It was rough. Control was lost, and the plane crashes. The front sinks right into the water, and those people have no chance. Only the people in the back, in the smoking section, were still above water and had the opportunity to sort of jump out of the plane into this freezing cold bay and then get rescued. So 19 people died in that crash. Bertrand Russell survived, and he lived for many more years, right? 22 more years, because he smoked. Smoking saved his life. So when I sort of get upset about smoking, I have to realize that because of smoking, it did save one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century and give us another 22 years of his incredibly unique voice. Okay, let us move on and talk about the essay. The essay is published actually in Harper's Magazine. It's an essay not just for philosophers, it's for everyone. And you can go find the essay in the Harper's archive, which is accessible to everybody on the internet. It's from 1932. And I sort of want to get into that because we need the context of when Russell was writing this. And give us a sense of why he's writing, what he's trying to address. So 1932, that's in between World War I and World War II. And it's a period where we have these two political figures ascending. We have Mussolini and Hitler. And this is a photo from when Mussolini visited Munich in 1940. Okay, at this point, Mussolini has taken over Italy, and Hitler is a major figure in 1932, but he is not yet chancellor. He'll become chancellor in the following year and then also take complete control of that country. And he's democratically elected. Okay, so what's going on? More historical context. And I'm just trying to paint a picture, put a little bit narrative to this. If you want to go more into this, you should go research this stuff yourself. But Mussolini is bringing fascism to Italy. And one way that we can understand fascism as a political theory is that it tried to model itself after the corporation. And a big advancement in society was industrialization and the emergence of the modern corporation, which is a very productive and successful way of organizing and profiting, right? So why shouldn't a nation also sort of model itself after the corporation and try to become very profitable? And corporations have sort of a very pyramid structure, and at the top is the CEO who runs the ship, makes decisions, has complete control. Right? Underneath that, you have sort of a powerful administrative staff, right? And everyone works together. The word fascism actually comes from this word fascia, and it meant a bundle of sort of twigs or, very thin bendable branches that by themselves, right, don't do much. But when you bring a bunch together and tape them together, it became a very formidable weapon. The fascia. So you have all these twigs and kind of small sapling branches, tie them all together. All of a sudden it's flexible, and it's also now really strong and heavy and hard, and it was used as a weapon. So the effectiveness of bringing lots of people together, organizing, binding them together. All right, so we have a little bit of sense of fascism, Mussolini's fascism. Let's turn to Germany. Hitler's party was called the National Socialists, right? And so we have here, marketing-wise, right, a plea for nationalism and socialism. What sense was that? Well, why was that such a good sort of marketing to the German people? Well, we have to think about what happened in World War I. Germany lost. So when you're the loser, you don't get to write the treaty at the end. The winners get to write that. And so you are going to get the bad deal when that happens. And that certainly, it was very hard for Germany after World War II. They were heavily in debt, and the economy was in shambles, and unemployment was had skyrocketed. It was just a horrible place, right? And it felt hopeless. And so you had someone who came along, a political leader, who spoke to people who felt hopeless and promised them the things they didn't see that they could get at that time, right? Nationalism, to feel good about your country, to feel pride for your country, for people who, felt like losers, right, after World War One, and particularly Germany, which had a really amazing history, right, of growth and success and art and literature and culture. To all of a sudden enter into a world war and lose was pretty devastating. So you have someone who's trying to bring back this sort of raw patriotism, and then the socialism. Well, Hitler was offering to Germans, if they followed him, that with a new sort of reinvigorated Germany, that they would have that food, they would have healthcare, they would have education, they would all have homes, right? All this social security that they desired they would get. Of course, along with this plan, along with these aims, was a plan to purge Germany of all, and I put in quotes, non-pure Germans, right? People like Jews, gypsies, homosexuals, who were systematically murdered during World War II and the Holocaust. So, very dark, right? This is what's happening right now in Europe. And Bertrand Russell, right, he's in England, he's a European, he's in contact with academics and intellectuals all over Europe. He sees what's happening. He's able to anticipate what's going on. That first World War, when it happened, it wasn't called World War One. It was called the war to end all wars. It was going to be the last war. But now that the war had ended, you could see maybe it wasn't going to be the last war. Maybe we're marching back again towards another world war, and it would be worse. More people would die. So I think Bertrand Russell is wondering, is there a way to avert this impending war that we seem to be heading towards? Is that possible? Now, what's strange is that he would think an essay praising idleness, not doing anything, would be able to do something. This seems paradoxical. So we have to get in there and sort of try to unpack and figure out what's going on. And to our contemporary ears, it just sounds strange to praise idleness, to praise doing nothing. And historically, for centuries, right, millennia, right, we haven't praised idleness, we praised the opposite. Let's look at this piece of artwork. This is from 1572. This is an engraving, which is different than a woodcut. Woodcuts you carve into the wood, but with an engraving, you sort of scratch out on a piece of metal. You make grooves in it, and then you can print copies of your artwork. So this is part of a series called The Reward of Labor and Diligence. And this particular engraving was labor and diligence enjoying their simple meal. And there's another one where labor, which is personified as man, and diligence personified as a woman, they get married. So these two, labor and diligence, they were meant for each other, right? They have a partnership. Be diligent in your work, right? Put effort and work hard. And then labor, the work itself, go together. And if you work hard, honest day's work, what do you get? You get an honest meal. And that's what we have here being served. It's not a fancy meal, but it's one that was honestly earned. Okay, and the artist here is Philip Gall, 1537 to 1612, and is actually, and this happened a lot, it's based on another artist's work. In this case, it's based on a drawing that was made by Martin van Heemskerk. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break the essay into 7 parts and try to work through those parts. Again, hopefully you've read the article And this is just meant to help get into some of the ideas. I'm not going to get into everything that is in the essay, in the article. So the first part I'd say is in many ways about class division, right? And this applied in 1932, and in many ways it still applies, right? In modern times, we do have real class divisions, and as that middle class shrinks, as the wealth gap grows ever larger, right, we really do grow. It looks more and more like two classes. And Russell, when he writes about this, the two classes is the working class and the leisure class, right? And we can all sort of, in our heads, come up with some sort of stereotypical image of what these two classes do or look like, right? The working class, they work really hard. They work most days, all day long, and they come home tired, but hopefully they're able to just get by, right? Just get by. They've got to go back to work the next day to try to work really hard to make another paycheck and be able to pay the bills and get food on the table, right? So the working class works really hard, and that's mainly what they need to think about to survive, is working. On the other hand, the leisure class, they don't work at all. They don't have to work. You know, if they do any work, it's for fun. They don't need to do it. And mainly what they do is try to have fun. And, you know, you might imagine that they spend a lot of time kind of lounging around some golf resort or the golf club, and then, you know, they go to a fancy restaurant, and maybe they hit up the opera at night, and it's a long day. It's a lot of work in a way, but it's leisure, right? So we have the leisure class and we have the working class. And what's his point? Well, one thing he points out is that whether you're a part of the leisure class or the working class, both sides praise work and praise hard work. That's a good thing. And people would say things like work keeps people out of trouble, right? If you don't have work to do, you're gonna cause trouble. You're gonna get into some sort of problem. You might start stealing things. You might just go crazy. Who knows what could happen if you don't have any work to do? So give people work so that they stay out of trouble. Another thing you might hear is that hard work is sort of an essential ingredient to a virtuous life, right? This is part of being honest and just a good person, is that you work hard. Okay, so both sides praise hard work. And Russell in this section notes that, well, it might seem sort of weird that the leisure class is going to praise work, but they do need people to work because it's actually very expensive to live in the leisure class, right? When you have a lot of money, people charge you more money to, you know, have a membership at the golf club. So you need more people working for you. You need that machine to operate for you to have the money to come in to be able to pay for all these things and part of your luxurious life. Okay. Part two. Part two deals with sort of industrialization, the progress of society. And, well, incredible progress in terms of productivity, efficiency. We've learned how to make things faster with less people, right? If you're making things by hand, if you're making a desk, right, you might have 5 workers and you might make one desk in an hour, right? I'm just making this up. But with a well-designed factory and 5 workers, you might make 100 desks in an hour, right? Working on that line, it's automated. Maybe not everything, you still need some workers, but all of a sudden you can make a lot more desks. So Russell says, look at what's happening here, right? If the same amount of workers are making more desks, and those desks are being sold, then there's more profit here. But for the most part, wages haven't really gone up, right? People are still just getting by in this work. So, and wages have gone up a little bit, but workers had to unite, form unions. They had to bargain for those higher wages. They had to bargain to get less hours, safer conditions. So there is also a history of some improvement, but it requires a lot of work in itself. So what's the point? Why are we talking about this? Why are we talking about more productive factories? Well, this ties into part 3 of the essay, A Radical Proposal. Russell's radical proposal is that we should all have 4-hour work days. He was saying this in 1932, 4-hour work day. Back then they had worked really hard to get sort of 8 hours or 10 hours. So this is like cutting it in half. And how is that possible? Well, a few things. First, we're much more efficient and productive in producing products. But also the workforce grew, because during World War I, all the men went off to war. These factories still needed to operate. So women entered the workforce, and they were able to operate all these factories just as well as the men did. And they, many of them, enjoyed the independence that came from getting a salary, getting out of the house. So we have more people who wanted to be a part of the labor force, and we have more productive factories. After the war, though, right, all the men came home. They wanted their jobs back. Some of them got it, some of them didn't. There was also improvements in efficiency during the war. So unemployment rose everywhere. It's especially bad in Germany, but unemployment is an issue everywhere. And, well, if people aren't working, they become desperate, right? If they don't have money to put food on the table, what are they going to do? In desperation, you might follow somebody that you wouldn't follow if you weren't desperate. So, how do we solve this problem? Well, we can make more jobs by letting people work less hours. But if they work less hours, right, make half as much money, how are they going to survive? And what Russell says is, well, they're so productive, right? They're much more than twice as productive with all the automation and improvements, right? Russell says they should be able to make at least double what they're making. So if they work a 4-hour day, they should get a full salary of what they were making before. So they should be able to still get by on a 4-hour day, a half day, whatever that might be at that time. So we have more workers. So if we had a 4-hour day, we'd still have enough workers to fill all those positions. The factories could still run all day long. We would just have more shifts, and people would still make enough money to be able to survive. So that's the proposal, and those are some of the facts that he's using to try to support his conclusion about the increased productivity and the increased labor force, the labor pool. Okay, let's go to the next section, part 4. If we're only working 4 hours a day, sort of half a day of work, and getting full pay, then that means we have a lot more free time. Well, Russell says the free time that people had when they were just part of the working class, when they finally got home from work, they were exhausted. They weren't able to do much. In fact, really what they were able to do is sort of mindless entertainment. Things we do today where we just sit in front of the TV and just watch something that's not too complicated. We might watch some reality television and watch some drama before us, or we might watch a game show or something like that. I don't know. Just mindless entertainment, right? Where we could just be half comatose and have a few laughs before we go to sleep because we got to go to work tomorrow. Okay, but if we're only working 4 hours or a half day, then we won't be as exhausted when we get home. We might be able to do other things during our free time. Part 5, a false dilemma. Right? When we look at two classes, we say, okay, there's either the working class or the leisure class, and where do you want to be? And, you know, well, buy a lottery ticket if you want to be in the leisure class, or you're going to be in the working class. It's one or the other. Russell's saying, well, maybe there's a third option, right? Maybe it's not just those two choices. And if we only present people with those two choices, that's the fallacy of the false dilemma. Because why can't we have both? Why can't we have this half day and then have the other half for leisure and have a balance in our life? And we might say, okay, well, I'm never going to get a half day and get full salary, but maybe I could work for more balance in my life so that I have a good sort of work leisure balance. So that's our third option here. That's what Russell is arguing we need. We need more balance. He's hoping that by having a half day, we can solve the problem of such high unemployment. Right? Will that help avert World War II? I don't know. Didn't happen, but would it have? Right? That's something to think about. Okay. Part 6. Kinds of leisure. I've already sort of talked about the kind of leisure that the working class, when they had time, would participate in. That was passive leisure. It requires little effort. It's mindless. So the other type of leisure is active leisure, and it requires energy. It often requires thinking, complex thought, communication, cultural exchange, skillful activity, learning. Right? And these are the types of leisure that Russell says people would be able to participate in if they had more time and more energy. And another point that he makes is that without leisure, what's the whole point of life itself, right? If all we do is work, then what's the point? Isn't the point of working to be able to have some good moments, be able to have some pleasure in life, be able to have some luxury for ourselves, some leisure time? So if we're not getting that, what's the point? And the leisure that Russell says is going to be the most rewarding is going to be this active leisure, that it's really going to make your life much more enriched. Well, one of the active leisures that Russell's talking about is philosophy. So philosophy for Russell is a leisure activity, right? So it's not work. It's not going to put food on the table. It's not going to fix the infrastructure, but it does have a purpose. It does give us something, right? It makes our lives worthwhile. It makes our lives enriched and meaningful. And maybe that's something that we do need. And maybe it's something that a lot of people really need right now. And so maybe it makes sense to have more time and to reserve some energy to do things like picking up a philosophy book or having a philosophical conversation with somebody. All right. A lot to think about. Hope you enjoyed the video, and please watch another one.